The hotel was already awake before the sun. Lights glowed behind tall glass walls, and soft music moved through the wide lobby like slow water. People in clean suits crossed the floor with phones in their hands, talking fast and not looking up. Somewhere near the entrance, a clock ticked louder than it should have. Time mattered here. He stood near a long window, jacket folded over his arm, eyes fixed on the street below. Cars moved in tight lines. Horns sounded, then stopped. His phone buzzed again. Another message. Another reminder that he was late. He was not late by accident. Everything in his life was planned down to the minute. But that morning something felt wrong from the start. The meeting he was here for could change his company's future. A deal worth more than most people would earn in many lifetimes. And yet the one thing he needed most was not ready. Inside his pocket was a folded letter. Old paper. Faded ink. The kind of letter people no longer wrote. It had been sent to him weeks ago, forwarded through many hands, with a short note attached that said only, "You need to read this before you decide." The problem was simple and heavy at the same time. The letter was written in a language he did not understand. He had tried everything. Translation apps failed. His assistant could not help. Even the hotel's front desk had shaken their heads. The language was rare, and the handwriting was old, uneven, filled with emotion rather than clean grammar. He took the letter out again and unfolded it carefully as if it might break. The words stared back at him, dark and curved, full of meaning he could not reach. Each minute that passed made his chest tighter. That was when he noticed her. She moved quietly across the marble floor. Pushing a cleaning cart, her uniform was simple and neat. Her hair was pulled back. She did not rush, but she did not waste time either. She cleaned what needed cleaning and moved on. Most people did not see her. Most people never did. She stopped near a small sitting area and began wiping a table. Her movements were calm and careful, as if she respected the space, even though it did not belong to her. He hesitated. He had never spoken to a hotel cleaner before, not directly. Not like this. But time was running out, and the letter felt heavier in his hand. He walked toward her. "Excuse me," said, his voice sharp without meaning to be. She looked up at once. Her eyes were alert, not afraid. She nodded slightly, waiting. He held out the letter. "Do you know this language?" She glanced at the paper, then back at him. "Yes," she said. The word landed harder than he expected. "Yes." He repeated. "Yes," she said again, more softly. "I can read it." He did not hide his surprise. He looked at her uniform, then at the cart, then at the letter again. "I don't need it perfect," he said quickly. "Just the meaning. I'll pay you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out some cash, holding it where she could see it. The amount was more than most people earned in a full day, maybe more. She did not look at the money. She looked at the letter. "If I translate this," she said slowly, "you need to listen. Not just hear the words, listen." That was not the answer he expected. He nodded, unsure why. "Fine, just tell me what it says." She took a breath, then gently touched the edge of the paper, asking permission without words. He handed it to her. She did not rush. She read the first line silently, then the second. Her face changed, just a little. Her shoulders tightened, then relaxed. She began to speak. "This letter is from someone who waited a long time," she said. "Someone who felt forgotten." He frowned. "Just translate," he said. She looked up at him. "I am translating," she went on. "It says the writer once trusted you. Not because of money, but because you promised something. The promise was not written on paper. It was spoken. And it was broken." His hand curled slowly into a fist. "That's not possible," he said. She continued, her voice steady. "The writer says they do not want revenge. They want understanding. They want you to remember who you were before success made everything louder." The sounds of the lobby seemed to fade. Phones, footsteps, voices all pushed into the background. He was suddenly aware of his own breathing. "Keep going," he said. She nodded and read more. The letter talks about a small place by a river, about late nights and early mornings, about working not for profit, but for purpose. It asks one question again and again. Do you still remember? He swallowed. That's enough, he said. But his voice was weaker now. She did not stop. The last part says this. If you have forgotten, this letter will mean nothing. But if you remember, then you know what you must do. Silence settled between them. He stared at the floor. The marble felt cold through his shoes. A memory rose without warning. A younger version of himself. A different life. A promise made without thinking it would cost anything. He looked at her again. Really looked this time. How did you learn this language? He asked. She folded the letter carefully and handed it back. From my father, she said. And from books, and from life. He nodded, still lost in thought. Why are you working here? She smiled, not sadly, not happily. Just honestly, because life does not always follow education. His phone buzzed again. This time, he ignored it. He held out the money once more. Please, take it. She shook her head. That was not a job. That was a moment. She returned to her cart and moved on, leaving him standing there with the letter in his hand and a weight in his chest he had not felt in years. As she walked away, he realized something that made his heart pound. The meeting he was rushing toward suddenly felt smaller than the words he had just heard, and for the first time in a long time. He wondered if success had cost him more than he ever noticed. He folded the letter again and placed it back in his pocket. He did not know yet what he would do, but he knew one thing. He would never read those words the same way again. After the encounter with the maid, he could not focus on anything else. Every step toward the elevator felt heavier than before. The polished floor reflected the lights in his own tense reflection. Each ring of his phone seemed distant, almost unimportant. He kept thinking about the words she had read. The words had weight. They had life. They had truth. He returned to his room, closing the door slowly behind him. The silence was almost foreign, broken only by the soft hum of the air conditioner. He placed the letter carefully on the desk, as if it were fragile glass. It had once been just a piece of paper. Now it was a mirror of his own past. He poured himself a glass of water and sat down, staring at the letter without touching it. The words the maid had spoken kept replaying in his mind. Do you still remember? He whispered to himself, barely audible. He did remember. He remembered more than he wanted to. But remembering was painful. Remembering made him feel small. Remembering reminded him of mistakes he had buried beneath years of ambition. The doorbell rang unexpectedly. He jumped, heart skipping. It was his assistant. She looked worried, holding a tablet and a folder. She spoke quickly, trying not to notice the tension in the room. The meeting is in 20 minutes. Are you ready? He nodded absently. Yes, he said, but the word felt hollow. Ready for what? Another boardroom. Another series of handshakes and promises? He could not shake the feeling that the letter and the words the maid had spoken were more urgent than any deal, more important than any profit. He decided he needed to see her again. It was not about money. It was about understanding, about truth, about someone who had seen more than he had ever expected anyone to see. He left the room, glancing at the letter one last time before sliding it into his jacket pocket. He did not know what he would say, only that he had to speak with her in the lobby. He found her quietly arranging chairs in a small corner near the elevators. She looked up, surprised but calm when she noticed him. There was no fear in her eyes. There was only curiosity, and perhaps a hint of amusement at his urgency. Can I talk to you? He asked, careful not to sound commanding. She nodded and gestured to a quieter hallway. He followed. The sounds of the hotel faded as they walked. He noticed for the first time the small details around him, the soft colors of the walls, the way the sunlight touched the floor, the quiet rhythm of people moving in the distance. Everything seemed sharper, more alive. They stopped near a service elevator. He turned to her, taking a deep breath. I don't know how to explain this, he began. But what you said? It changed something inside me. I need to know more. How did you understand it so clearly? How did you know what it meant? She considered his question. Her eyes softened, but she remained cautious. I have seen many letters, many words. Some are written for money, some for love, some for regret. I have learned to see beyond the paper, to hear what is not spoken, to feel what is hidden. He listened, trying to grasp her meaning. It was not just about translation. She had understood the feeling behind the words. She had understood intention, history, and heart. That was more than he had ever learned from a boardroom, a deal, or a contract. I need your help again, said a little hesitantly. There are more letters, more documents like this. I cannot read them. I need someone who can tell me the truth. She studied him. There was silence, long and tense. Then she spoke. Truth is heavy. Are you ready for it? He nodded. I think I am. They returned to a small corner near the hotel lounge, sitting at a quiet table. He opened his jacket and took out another letter. This one was thicker, with creases showing years of handling. She reached out carefully, turning it in her hands. Her eyes narrowed slightly as she read the first line. He watched her face, trying to see if she would struggle, but she did not. Her voice began softly, carrying the meaning of the words across the air. It speaks of decisions made too quickly, promises not kept. In the quiet suffering that followed, she said, the writer hoped someone would remember them. Someone would understand why they felt forgotten. It is not just a story. It is a warning. And a plea. He felt a tight knot in his chest. This letter was different. He realized that the words were not about money or business. They were about people. About consequences. About life beyond ambition. As she continued, he asked questions. Simple ones at first, then deeper ones. Why did the writer feel abandoned? What had caused the pain? Could the damage be fixed? She answered carefully, not too fast, letting the meaning sink in. With each sentence, he felt a strange mix of shame and clarity. He was part of the story. He had contributed unknowingly to someone's disappointment and hurt. Hours passed, though it felt like minutes. The hotel around them moved on without noticing, but they were suspended in time. She did not rush. She did not glance at the clock. She simply translated, told the story, and shared understanding. He realized he had never met someone who treated words with such care, such respect. She had dignity in her work that he had never appreciated before. When the final line of the letter was spoken, silence fell. He did not know whether to feel relief or sorrow. Both, he realized. He looked at her, noticing the strength in her calm expression. She had given him more than translation. She had given him perspective, honesty, and a reflection he could not escape. He reached into his pocket again, holding out the money he had promised. She shook her head gently. This is not payment, she said. This is learning. This is remembering. That is worth more than anything you can offer. He understood then that she was right. Money could not buy the lessons she had given him. It could not repay the clarity he now had, nor the awareness of his own past. He had come looking for words, but he had found truth. He thanked her. Not with a card, a gift, or a tip, but with something far more valuable, a promise to listen, to reflect, and to change if possible. She nodded, as if she knew he meant it, and turned back to her work. Leaving him to sit with the weight of the letters and the depth of what he had learned by the time he finally left the hotel that evening, he was no longer the same man who had arrived. The streets, the cars, the honking, the urgency, all seemed smaller compared to the moment he had shared. The letters, the words, and the maid's calm understanding had opened a door he had forgotten existed, and he knew that the story was far from over. The next morning, he woke up earlier than usual. The sun had just begun to touch the edges of the city skyline, painting the streets in soft orange light. He did not feel like rushing to another meeting. Instead, he felt the pull to return to the hotel lobby, to find the maid and speak with her again. He arrived quietly, moving through the lobby with more awareness than before. He noticed the way the carpet softened each step, the gentle hum of the cleaning machines, the subtle smell of fresh flowers near the entrance. Everything was alive in a way he had never noticed. Most people walked past without seeing it. He had started seeing it, She was there, pushing her cart along the same hallway as the day before. She looked up when she saw him. There was no surprise this time, only recognition. She paused and waited for him to speak. "I need to ask you something," he said, keeping his voice low. "About how you understood the letter? Not just the words, but the meaning. How do you do it?" She smiled faintly, not mocking, not secretive, just calm. "I pay attention," she said. "Words are more than words. They carry the person who wrote them. Their feelings, their fears, their hopes. You listen carefully, you notice the space between the words, and you feel it. That is all." He nodded slowly. That was simple, but not easy. It required patience, observation, and empathy, qualities he had rarely needed in his life until now. He had chased results, numbers, deadlines. He had measured people by productivity, not by heart. He hesitated. He reached into his pocket and pulled out another folded piece of paper. This one was smaller, but looked older, more fragile. "This is another letter," he said. "It's important. I think it is connected to the first one." She took it carefully, turning it over in her hands as if it might crumble. Her eyes narrowed slightly as she examined the writing. Then, without a word, she began reading. The letter spoke of struggle and perseverance, of days filled with hope and nights filled with fear. It was a story of someone working silently, watching life move around them, trying to survive without losing dignity. Each line carried a weight he could feel in his chest. The sentences were not just words. They were small pieces of a soul reaching out. He asked questions again, and she answered with care. Her translations were slow, but deliberate. He noticed how she paused to think about the emotions behind each sentence, ensuring that he understood not just the literal words, but the truth they carried as she spoke. He began to recognize parts of himself in the story. He remembered choices he had made in the past, decisions taken too quickly, promises broken in the pursuit of success. He felt the sting of guilt, sharp but cleansing. He realized that the letter was not just a record of someone else's life, it was a reflection of his own actions. "I didn't know," he whispered at one point, his voice trembling. "I didn't know it would matter this much." She looked at him with steady eyes. "It always matters," she said. "Even when you think it doesn't, even when the world says it is too late." Words like these remind us that we are connected, that what we do affects others, even in ways we never see. He fell silent, letting her words sink in. For the first time in years, he felt the weight of being human, of having responsibility beyond contracts and deals. The city outside the window seemed distant, insignificant compared to the small truths that had been shared in this quiet corner of the hotel. Hours passed without them noticing. People walked past, checking their phones, rushing to appointments, oblivious to the transformation happening at that table. She continued translating, not rushing, not pausing unnecessarily, just letting the letters speak. At one point, he realized he had not thought about his own obligations for hours. He did not care. He wanted to understand every nuance, every feeling. The letters were more than documents. They were living memories, reaching across time to teach him something he had long ignored. When she paused, he looked at her again. "How do you manage to do this every day?" he asked, "Working, cleaning, translating." "It seems impossible," she smiled softly. "Life is heavy. People are heavy. But we carry what we can. We do what is necessary. Sometimes we find meaning in the most unexpected places." He thought about that. She had found meaning in letters that most people would have thrown away. She had seen truth where others would have ignored it. And in doing so, she had shown him a reflection of himself. Forcing him to confront his own failings, he realized then that he had underestimated her. He had assumed a maid could not carry wisdom, insight, or perspective. He had assumed her world was small. But he was wrong. Her world was vast, not in wealth, but in understanding. She had lived through experiences, noticed details, and learned lessons he had never encountered in boardrooms or meetings. He asked her if she had ever shared these skills with anyone else. She shook her head. "People do not always want to see the truth," she said. They are afraid it will change them. They prefer comfort to clarity. He thought about that. How many times had he preferred comfort over clarity? How many letters had he ignored? How many people had he overlooked because it was easier to focus on profit than on principle? I want to change that, he said quietly. I want to understand more, to see more. Can you help me? She looked at him, her expression unreadable for a moment. Then she nodded. I can. But you must promise to be honest with yourself and with the people around you. He nodded without hesitation. I promise. For the next several hours, they went through more letters. Some were handwritten, some typed, some faded beyond easy reading. Each one carried a story of hope, fear, love, and loss. Each one revealed aspects of life he had never truly considered. With every translation, he felt the layers of his own detachment peel away, exposing the person he had been beneath the armor of wealth and success. She explained the subtleties of language, the hidden meanings, the emotions between the lines. She did not lecture. She guided. She did not judge. She reflected. In her calm presence, he began to feel humility for the first time in decades. When the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the lobby floor, they finally paused. He was exhausted, not physically, but emotionally. He had confronted memories, regrets, and truths he had long ignored. Yet he felt lighter, more awake, more human. Thank you, he said, not knowing how else to express the depth of his gratitude. She simply smiled. You are welcome. Remember, it is not just about understanding letters. It is about understanding life. He left the hotel that evening with the letters carefully folded in his jacket, each one carrying a piece of wisdom he could not ignore. The city streets felt quieter, calmer. The noise, the rush, the constant demand for more, all seemed distant. He had learned something far more important than any deal or contract: understanding, empathy, and the courage to face the truth. And he knew, without doubt, that his life would never be the same again. The next day, he arrived at the hotel earlier than usual, feeling a mixture of anticipation and nervousness. His mind was full of questions and uncertainties. The letters had stirred something deep inside him, something he could not name yet. He felt the pull to meet her again, to continue the process of understanding and reflection that had begun over the past days. She was in the lobby, moving calmly, cleaning quietly, as if she had not noticed him approaching. But when she did look up, her expression was warm yet unreadable. She gestured toward a quiet corner, and he followed her. The hotels seemed alive with movement, yet around them, time felt slower, more deliberate. He realized that when he was with her, he saw details he had ignored for years, the way light fell on surfaces, the subtle expressions of people passing by, the soft hum of voices in the background. He placed another letter on the table, one he had discovered tucked away in a folder that had been ignored for months. It was different from the others, heavier in tone, more personal. The writing was hurried and jagged, filled with raw emotion. He felt a tight knot form in his stomach as he handed it to her. She looked at it carefully, turning it over in her hands. Her eyes scanned the first few lines, narrowing slightly, then relaxing. She began to read aloud, her voice calm but carrying the full weight of the emotions within the letter. It spoke of mistakes made, opportunities lost, and the quiet pain of being misunderstood. Each word seemed to hang in the air, pressing gently against his chest. He listened, absorbing every nuance, every subtle detail. The letter was a story not just of another person's experiences, but also a mirror reflecting his own past. He saw choices he had made, moments where he had prioritized ambition over people, and times when he had ignored the feelings of those who trusted him. The weight of it was heavy, but he could not look away. Why did this letter exist? He asked quietly after a moment. Why did someone write this if it was only to carry pain? She looked at him, thoughtful. Letters are not just for recording events. They are for sharing truth, even when it hurts. People write because they need someone to understand them. Someone who will see what they have endured and acknowledge it. Sometimes the words survive long after the person who wrote them has been forgotten. He nodded slowly, understanding the depth of her words. And you can see it, feel it, understand it because you pay attention. You notice what others do not. She smiled faintly. I listen with my heart, not just my eyes. And I have learned that the meaning of words is often hidden beneath their surface. To truly understand someone, you must go beyond what they write and see what they live. He took a deep breath, feeling a shift inside him. It was as if a veil had been lifted from his mind. He realized that he had spent so many years chasing goals that had little meaning, ignoring the human connections that gave life its true value. This realization was uncomfortable, but it was also liberating. He felt a sense of clarity he had never experienced before. "Can you help me with the rest of these letters?" he asked, his voice steady. "I want to understand everything. I want to see the truth, even if it is painful." She nodded, and they began to work together. Each letter revealed stories of struggle, hope, regret, and resilience. As she translated, he listened intently, asking questions, clarifying meanings, and reflecting on the lessons each story carried. She guided him gently, encouraging him to see beyond the words and understand the people behind them. As the day progressed, they shared moments of quiet reflection. He realized that the act of listening, of truly hearing someone's story, was powerful. It demanded patience, humility, and empathy. He had never practiced these skills in the way he was now. The experience was transformative, challenging him to confront his own shortcomings and recognize the value of understanding others. At one point, he asked her about her own life. "You understand so much about people. How did you learn this?" She paused, her expression softening. "Life taught me," she said. "I have seen hardship, witnessed struggles, and felt the weight of expectations. I learned that every person has a story, and every story matters. Not everyone listens, but when someone does, it can change everything." He reflected on her words, realizing that she had lived with awareness and compassion, qualities he had overlooked in his pursuit of success. Her perspective was different from anyone he had ever known. She valued understanding over power, empathy over achievement, and honesty over convenience. The sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the lobby floor. They had worked for hours, yet neither of them seemed tired. The letters had woven a tapestry of human experience, connecting past and present, pain and hope, mistakes and understanding. Each story added a layer of insight that he could not ignore. He felt a deep sense of gratitude toward her, not just for translating the letters, but for guiding him through a process of self-reflection that he had long avoided. He realized that the lessons he had learned could not be taught in a classroom, negotiated in a boardroom, or measured in numbers. They could only be experienced, felt, and understood. "Thank you," he said quietly, almost reverently, "for everything. For the letters, for the stories, for helping me see." She looked at him with calm eyes. "You are welcome. But remember, this is only the beginning. Understanding is not a destination. It is a journey. You must carry these lessons with you, not just today, but every day." He nodded, feeling the truth of her words. He understood that the encounter with her had changed him, that the letters had opened his eyes, and that the way he lived his life from this point forward would be different. He felt a sense of responsibility, a desire to act with awareness and compassion, to value people and stories as much as he had once valued success and money. As he prepared to leave the hotel, he glanced at her one last time. She was returning to her duties, moving quietly and gracefully, as if nothing had happened. But he knew that what had happened would stay with him forever. The lessons, the stories, the connection they had shared would guide him in ways he could not yet fully understand. Walking out into the evening air, he felt a sense of peace and determination. The city lights shimmered, but they no longer seemed overwhelming. The noise of life felt quieter, more manageable. He carried with him the weight of the letters, the lessons they contained, and the understanding that true success was measured not by wealth or power, but by the depth of empathy, the courage to face the truth, and the ability to connect with others in meaningful ways. And he knew that the journey was far from over. that there were more letters to read, more stories to hear, and more truths to uncover. But for the first time in his life, he felt ready to face them. Guided by the wisdom and insight of someone who had taught him the power of listening and understanding, the next morning, he woke with a sense of purpose he had not felt in years. The city outside his window seemed different. The noise, the traffic, the rush of people, all of it existed, but he felt separated from it, as if he could observe it without being pulled into its chaos. The letters, the maid, the lessons he had learned, they were alive in his mind, guiding him towards something he did not fully understand yet. He dressed quickly but thoughtfully, choosing a suit that was neat but not flashy. For the first time in a long while, he felt that his actions could reflect more than ambition. They could reflect awareness. He took the letters he had collected over the past days and placed them carefully in his briefcase. Each one carried a story, a lesson, a mirror of human experience he could not ignore. When he arrived at the hotel, the lobby felt quiet, almost sacred in its normal morning bustle. He saw her immediately, moving efficiently, quietly, a calm presence in a busy world. She noticed him and gave a small nod. There was no surprise, only recognition. He felt an unexpected comfort in that nod, as if it were a reassurance that he was on the right path. He approached her carefully, unsure how to begin. "I have thought a lot about what you taught me," he said. "About listening, understanding, seeing beyond words, and I realize I have been blind in many ways. I want to do better. I want to change." She looked at him steadily, her eyes calm and unflinching. "Change is not easy," she said, "but acknowledging the need is the first step. What you do next will show whether you have truly understood." He nodded, feeling the weight of her words. He placed the briefcase on a nearby table and opened it. The letters were carefully stacked inside, each one telling a story, each one holding truth that could not be ignored. "I want to make things right," he said. "Not just for myself, but for the people who wrote these letters, and for anyone who has been affected by my actions. I don't know exactly how to do it, but I know I must start." She listened quietly, then spoke. "Start with honesty. Speak to those who have been affected. Acknowledge what happened. You cannot undo the past, but you can act with awareness moving forward." He realized the simplicity and power of her advice. It was not about grand gestures or public announcements. It was about truth, responsibility, and human connection. It was about facing reality, not avoiding it. Over the next few days, he began to take action. He reached out to people he had wronged, sending letters, making calls, and arranging meetings. At first, the responses were cautious, some skeptical, some angry, but he did not retreat. He listened. He acknowledged mistakes. He expressed regret, not excuses. He began to see the impact of his actions. The lives affected by decisions he had once considered inconsequential. With each conversation, he felt a weight lifting. The guilt and tension that had been constant companions began to ease. He realized that true responsibility involved more than acknowledgement. It involved understanding, compassion, and consistent effort to do better. The maid remained a quiet presence in his life. She did not demand recognition, nor did she seek reward. Her guidance had been subtle, yet profound. She had taught him to value empathy over ego, reflection over reaction, and human connection over ambition. Each day he saw her, he felt a renewed sense of commitment to live according to the lessons she had shared. One afternoon, he returned to the hotel with a final letter. One he had held back, unsure if he was ready to confront it. It was the oldest and most difficult of them all, filled with anger, disappointment, and sorrow. He placed it on the table, feeling a mix of fear and resolve. She took it in her hands, reading the first lines silently. Then she began translating, her voice steady, carrying the pain and hope embedded in the words. As he listened, he felt every emotion, every nuance. The letter spoke of lost trust, missed opportunities, and the quiet yearning for acknowledgement. It was a challenge, but he faced it without flinching. He knew that avoiding it would be easy, but meaningless. When the final line was spoken, silence filled the space between them. He felt a deep respect for the writer of the letter and for the maid who had guided him through its meaning. He realized that understanding did not erase mistakes, but it gave them purpose. It allowed him to act with intention, to choose a different path going forward. "I understand now," he said softly. "I understand the weight of what I have done and the responsibility I carry. Thank you for helping me see," she nodded. "Remember, this is only the beginning. Life will continue to present challenges. You will make mistakes again, but if you remember what you have learned, you can choose differently." He left the hotel that evening with a renewed sense of purpose. The city around him was the same, but he saw it differently. The people rushing by, the noise, the endless demands, it was still there, but he felt a sense of calm amidst it. He had discovered that true success was not measured by wealth, titles, or achievements, but by the depth of understanding, the courage to face the truth, and the ability to act with compassion. Days turned into weeks, and he continued to apply the lessons he had learned. He maintained connections with people he had once ignored, addressed situations he had avoided, and lived with greater awareness. The letters remained with him, not as burdens, but as reminders of the power of human experience and the responsibility that came with influence and privilege. The maid continued her work, quiet and steadfast. She never sought recognition, but her impact on him was immeasurable. She had shown him that listening, understanding, and acting with integrity were the most powerful tools one could possess. In the end, he realized that the encounter with her, the letters, and the stories they contained had transformed him in ways he could never have imagined. He had come seeking a simple translation, but he had found a lifetime of lessons. The experience had taught him humility, empathy, and the courage to confront truth. And though their paths would eventually diverge, the lessons would remain, guiding him in every decision, every action, and every interaction. He had learned that the smallest gestures, the quiet moments of understanding, could change lives, and he would carry that knowledge with him forever, honoring the trust, the words, and the person who had helped him see the world and himself clearly for the first time.